welcome to the Crush It with the Cosecs podcast, episode 2. I am Blaine Kosek,
What's up? What's up? My name is Lily Kosek.
the co-hosting queen of Chicago over here, Lily Kosek. And we are here to talk about how you crush it with COVID. And that may sound odd considering the pandemic is over. And
nobody wants to be crushing it with COVID.
yeah, nobody wants COVID, period. But
Yeah.
we're going to talk about how we crushed it during COVID, I guess, right? How all of this began, on the onset of the pandemic. And it was kind of an interesting time for everybody. And we decided to really hustle and double down on the time that we were given and kind of created this little empire we have started right now. So why don't you talk a little bit about how that kind of started, when we got back from Mexico, a week before the whole world shut down. And I remember, going through the airport in Cancun and they were checking our passports and we were like, what is going on? And at that point, we were just kind of getting started with real estate, really. I mean, we did have a new tenant that was just about to move in to our first property, essentially our first property. But it was just crazy times. And I don't know where else to go other than here's how we started, right, with COVID. And we were both teachers. So schools got shut down. And needless to say, I was a little excited about that.
We totally celebrated.
Like everyone else, we were at home. We were trapped. We had 2 kids that we, now had to take care of all day long. And we had...
Trapped was not what we were.
What was it?
We were getting boxes of wine, celebrating that we can finally be home with our kids. Because here's the bottom line. One of the reasons that we really wanted the financial freedom piece is the fact that there was never any flexibility in our budget for me to ever even stay home with our kids. And I felt not necessarily resentful to you because it wasn't your fault, but I think to the situation because I'm like, man, I went to school for so many years to learn about children and, how their brains work and how to teach them and how to reach to them. And then majority of the day, I'm doing that with somebody else's child, not my own. And when COVID happened, we were excited that we were actually able to teach our own kids. We love teaching, but our kids were, we didn't see them almost 10 hours a day. That's, we came home and a couple hours later, they were going to bed.
And it's interesting because we were having these conversations before the pandemic and we were using our time to try to figure out a way to get free, right? To give more time with our family. And then boom, the world gets shut down. And now, yes, we were still teaching from our home and it was, nowhere near real teaching. We had a lot more time together, a lot more family time together, and we absolutely loved it. But then we were thinking, okay, now we have this idea. How do we take back our time, right? We're giving all of our time to these children of other families. We want to give our time to our own kids. And real estate just kind of blossomed in front of us, right? We got introduced to Bigger Pockets, which I know many people have. I really dove into that podcast and really started introducing it to Lily. And to be quite honest, one of my friends, Carlos, who now lives in North Carolina, he's the one that brought Bigger Pockets up to me. And he said, you should listen to this. And next thing you know, I just got hooked. And obviously the first thing that I heard was, you got to read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then I started reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that instantly just lit a fire underneath me. And after I finished that book, there was no turning back for me. And I started talking to Lily about it. And I know a lot of you have heard me say this. Lily is a very pedal to the metal type of person. And I'm always the pump the brakes type of person, which works out well. But during COVID, when that happened, in between all of our boxes of wine and our Zooming with friends, having parties, via Zoom, we decided to really double down on our time and start investing in real estate.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces there because one of the things that COVID did teach us is the beautiful thing about how much you can get accomplished by working virtually. So I think that at the time we were like, well, how do we replace some of our income to maybe one day, step away from teaching and be home? And then COVID happened. And sure, like that first 2 weeks was definitely boxes of wine, hanging out with the kids until schools started figuring out, oh man, like this is going to be a little bit more extended. And that's when all that Zoom teaching came into place, which in that turn, we did need our nanny, which was my mom, to come and watch them because we were actually teaching. But that 100% opened up our eyes to, we were still teaching the same amount of classes that we were, but we had almost half of our day, our teaching day, with additional time. We saved time on commuting. We were home with our kids for lunch. When you've been teaching for over a decade or closer to two, you don't have to be planning. It's like, it's second nature to you. And we can come up with, things on the spot. So it's like we were not sitting for hours on end lesson planning. And
the commute was huge. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was commuting at that time an hour plus. I mean, it was going from Naperville and Downers Grove to Chicago every day in Chicago public schools on the Northwest side. It was literally, that's where I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. It was like that.
Not like was, okay, listen to Audible read, and not like he's reading and driving.
Come on now. But yeah, that's where, being a musician, I always listen to music. Always. I was driving to work, listening to music, just rocking out, getting ready for the day, and then all of a sudden, I fell into Audible and started with Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then it was it. I was done listening to music, and just so everybody knows, like. We're talking about this now because you never know when some weird thing is going to happen in the world that like just completely changes your like time schedule, right? So the pandemic came, nobody knew that was going to happen, and we took initiative with the time that we have. So what we're saying is, God forbid something happens in the world right now, or if say something changes in your world with your job, or you lose a job or something happens and you have more time, don't waste that time, right? Use it for something like this, like investing, a way to get yourself out of the W-2, world. And I think that was one of the big things like that really helped us because we had so much more time and we were using it. Yes, we were drinking, we were indulging and staying up way too late. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we were reading, we were investing, we were learning, we were educating ourselves like 100%. And that's when we did the first step was our HELOC. So we took the HELOC out on our house and then instantly rented it. And then our tenant moved in literally a week after the world shut down. And then there was all this talk about you don't have to pay rent anymore. And now all these landlords are freaking out. I literally went over to the house. It was a week after they moved in. And I knocked on the door and I said, hey, you still have to pay rent, right? Like this is a pandemic, but you guys are still working. And they were like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'm sorry, but like, I'm still going to like start the eviction process if you don't pay. If you lose your job or something, obviously talk to me. We'll figure something out. This is like literally verbatim, like what I talked to them. And they never missed a single payment and they stayed there for 2 years. And
they're still friends with us.
Yeah. And they turned into a client of mine. I helped them buy a new house and we still talk. They actually want to invest, with us as well. So anyways, back to the crushing it with COVID. So when you're in a situation where all of a sudden your lifestyle has changed and you're finding yourself maybe an opportunity to have more time. And this could be anything. This is like, what if you just got a new job and your commute was longer than it normally was? Normally you had a 15-minute commute and now it's an hour and a half. Like what can you do with that extra time in your car? And it's exactly that. You get an Audible book, you listen, you read it on your way, and you're educating yourself into this niche that whatever it is that you want to do. And it doesn't have to be real estate. Maybe it's writing music, maybe it's podcasting, whatever it is, take advantage of that time. So that's really what I think the focus is here for this podcast, today's episode. But
it was, but what really happened is we were in our second, or for you, I guess it would be third, but it was our second live and flip as a married couple. And the idea there was that we were going to live in this house, fix it up, and then rent it out again. That's what we did
maybe
with our
you should
first
explain
property.
to them what live and flip looks like.
So that would just be living in a home and rehabbing it while you are living through the renovations, which a lot of people do, right? But
kids
with
walking
us,
through dusty floors, nails sticking out of the walls,
But the idea typically is when we say flip, a lot of people at that point will sell the property because it has equity in it, and then they would take that equity. For us, it was more of a live and flip, rent out, because our whole idea was, well, let's keep these properties over time. We learned through Rich Dad, Poor Dad the value in holding on to properties over time and how they appreciate. And that is just something that has been instilled with us. And actually to this day, we've never fully had a flip. We keep fixing them up, but we just never keep selling them. So during COVID, we were actually on our second live and flip as a married couple. For Blaine, it was technically his third. So what a live and flip is essentially you buy a fixer-upper home, you move into it, and you fix it up while you're living there. And it sounds like an easy, beautiful thing, but the reality is you are living through dust. And we did this at the time our kids were 3 and 5. So essentially Blaine did most of the work himself, which was a major benefit of COVID for us, because he would finish teaching a class. Our kindergartner at the time, Noah, was having his class, and our daughter was getting entertained by her grandma. And I was teaching a class, and Blaine would, paint a wall or something.
I was literally in my working clothes. I'd have a t-shirt on and be like, I was a PE teacher, for those of you that didn't know. So teaching PE via Zoom or whatever, Google Meet, is pretty ridiculous. And with Chicago Public Schools, none of these kids were required to have their cameras on. So I'm staring at a screen of just black boxes. So I was making creative activities for them, but every time I set them up with an activity, I would step out of the screen and I'd be, like Lily said, painting the wall. I'd be putting up baseboard, I'm doing all this stuff and then coming back and checking on them.
I'd be on a Zoom call in the other room, and all of a sudden I would hear you sawing wood, yeah.
So this live and flip, we bought this home in Naperville, Illinois, and we ended up getting it it was actually on Thanksgiving Day,
before
right?
COVID,
Before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We closed on New Year's Eve.
Yes.
And then we went on a trip. Everything kind of got crazy. We didn't do any work here, or we didn't live here until COVID hit. I mean, I think we moved in
5 days before COVID started.
5 days, yeah.
We moved in.
Trying to say hello, talking to neighbors, everyone just slamming their doors, stay away from my house.
That was the time, if you guys don't remember, where even when you saw someone outside, down the block, people were running away from each other and trying to run back in the house because they didn't know really how far these germs were going to be spreading. So it was really, really awkward times.
So I guess the first couple months wasn't really a live-in flip because we were still in Downers Grove, and then we were coming here and working on some stuff. But once we did move in, there was still so much. We got all the nasty carpet out of here. Yeah. We did start demoing.
We got the mold out,
things.
is essentially. We got the mold out. We got new flooring, and then we moved in. But there were still, there was electrical that needed to be done. A new kitchen needed to be rehabbed. Bathrooms were all updated. And just a ton of stuff. Everything had to be painted, all new light fixtures.
And we decided we're going to crush it with COVID, right?
Yes.
During COVID, because I never actually had COVID, I don't think. But anyways, yeah, so crushing it while teaching remotely, flipping a house during all of this, educating ourselves, learning how to do this, understanding, what we can do. And at this time, I was also a realtor. So I had just begun my realtor side hustle, I guess you can call it, because I was still a full-time teacher. I got my real estate license and I just started working, selling for family and friends. And then COVID hit, and it made things, because the housing market got crazy during COVID. Yeah. So I am a teacher that I'm teaching remotely, and I'm literally teaching from my car. So I'm like going on showings. I've got my iPad or whatever, my computer set up. I'm talking to these kids and I'm setting them up with lessons. And then I go run out. I'm showing a house, and I get back in the car. And it was, I'm probably CPS doesn't want to know about all that. No, I don't.
Hopefully you don't take back your salary for that year.
I remember I had an inspection one time for a buyer, and like I told them, they knew I was a teacher. I didn't like hide that from people, but I'm like, hey, I'm just going to have this on right here, and I'm teaching these kids, like having them I would set up these pre-recorded like videos, and I'm walking around the house with the inspector and my buyers, and we're like talking numbers, and it was crazy.
No, I mean, this is what it looked like. It's like, hey, guys, okay, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, do some jumping jacks. And he would like mute himself, and he would like talk to us.
Do 1,000 jumping jacks. I'll be right back. No, it was never like that. But it was, I got creative. The housing market was insane, and I had lots of buyers. So I was like, I have to make this work. And there was no traffic. So anytime a buyer was like, hey, can I go see this house? I'm like, let's go, and I'm showing houses in the city. It was a ghost town. I'm showing in Naperville, Downers Grove. I'm all over the place. I think I did the most. I think I did like 25 million that year, which was 2020. It was crazy. And, a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was able to teach remotely and virtually. And that's where we started building up our money, right? We started saving money so that we could invest it. And crushing it with COVID, we were able to do that and save our money and not buy stupid things. Some people I know like went out, bought a new car. They went out, they bought a boat, or they bought a camper, and we're over here just
they were Airbnb-ing and going on vacations. We were home wearing leggings every single day, not shopping and buying properties. But it really did open up our eyes, because we were like, oh my gosh, we have so much extra time in our day. We don't have to commute. I think we realized, I think we always knew how strong our family dynamic is, but we realized like we could literally live anywhere on earth, just the four of us with our kids, and be completely happy. And that's all we needed. Like we just needed, each other and our children. And that was great. And that was part of I think that was part of the thing. We were starting to really look into investing more. And that's when those conversations happened, because he's like, well, what if we lose our house? And I'm like, well, we have a 4-bedroom house. Like there's 4 of us here. We sleep in the same room, so we've got an extra bedroom we don't even need. And it was kind of like, well, what's the worst that can happen? Like we were so happy just being us, and it was fine. Of course we would do the occasional Zoom calls and things, but we realized like we could go live in an apartment and we still would be happy. Like that it would be okay.
But we did have that security of the education, the jobs. We were still teachers. We had a guaranteed salary. True. So it was easy to be like, oh, whatever. Like we hadn't quit our jobs yet. So we had that like secure income. And now it's totally different. So, we do have to like worry about things, and we have to worst case scenario, we're going to go live up in Linden Station, Wisconsin, where we have our cabin because it's the cheapest house we own. And you know what, kids, guess what? You have 2 acres of land, but you have no neighbors.
It's actually not the cheapest house we own, believe it or not.
True. Good point. We'll get into that later. But anyways, back to COVID. So yeah, we're teaching, we're doing realtor work, we're living in flipping. And then what do we go and do? We buy our first house as a true investment property. With a partnership with her parents, we decided to go in together, because right after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, we gave it right to her mom and dad, and then they read it and they were like, oh my God, what are we doing? We need to do this. So we bought our first property, which was in Plainfield.
Yes, we bought the orange house.
The orange house, and we'll show you guys some pictures of this house. But to be quite honest, like a lot of people have horror stories about their first project, and I think because ours was like absolutely perfect. I mean, it's scary how great that whole project went. I mean, I look back at it and I'm like, how did we end up getting this property? So let's just talk about the numbers really quick. Okay.
Go for it.
Again, pedal to the metal over here. She finds a foreclosure in Plainfield. And she's like, go put an offer. And I'm like, can you hold on? Let me I don't know if this thing is worth it. Like there's something wrong with this house.
But value to the land and the location. This house is a newer house and it faces a golf course.
Well, it backs up to a golf course.
Right.
Well, yeah, but still.
Sorry, backs up to a golf course. It is gorgeous. I mean, the views are gorgeous.
It's a nice home in a really nice neighborhood, and it was listed at 169,000. Okay. I can't.
Maybe it was 169. We offered 165, something like that.
We did. Mm-hmm. So we offered 165, and if you haven't ever put in an offer for a foreclosure, there's different ways to go about it, but they don't like respond to you very quickly. Usually, there's like a time period. So finally, I'm like, you know what? We can do this for 165. We went and looked at this house. Like she said, the roof was brand new. The house was built in 2004. It was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath. But when you walked in the front door, they converted this area to like a bedroom. But it was like the walls were like.
It was a dining room that was converted to a bedroom, but the walls were
paper. It was like they put two studs up and they put like paneling up, so like you could literally like move it. So, but we were like,
can't lean on that wall.
We were like, this is actually a really good idea. They just didn't do it right. Mm-hmm. And then when you walk in the front door, you look up and you see this water damage, like total water damage. I'm like, oh boy, like what is going on? So. First thing I do is I go upstairs and I realize like that's the bathroom, and like the bathroom was nasty anyways. And we're like, well, we're going to rehab this whole bathroom. And at this time, like we are doing all the work. Like we're not hiring any contractors yet. This is our first project. We have to save as much money as possible. So I go up there, I'm looking at this. I'm like, you know what? It's probably a pipe underneath here. Once we rip this all out, like it's probably going to be pretty easy. So pedal to the metal over here is like, yeah, put an offer. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to put it at. And I'm like trying to look at comps. This was listed at 169, I think. So I'm like, fine, like let's just put 165 in. We can make that work. We're going to put 20% down. So it's $32,000. And we budgeted a new furnace we needed because we knew that the furnace and AC was trash. We needed a new furnace. So we budgeted like $5,000 for that.
Update both bathrooms.
And flooring and paint,
and then add
true
wall.
Mm-hmm. Fix the wall, add a closet.
Yeah.
And we budgeted like $15,000. So I put the offer in and just like literally forgot about it. We never get any response. Like we're just like, okay, we didn't get it, whatever. And I'm down in the basement at this house, probably right here in this room, like fixing something, and I get a phone call, and the listing agent is like, oh, you guys buying this house for yourself? And I'm like, which property are you talking about? He's like, oh, Plainfield. And I'm like.
And actually you said, which one?
Yeah, so we put in multiple offers over there. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm gonna get it signed for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I like hung up. And I'm like calling them like, can we, like, we need to go see this house. Like it was like 10 days later or something. So now I'm freaking out. I'm like, something just happened to this house. They lost a bunch of offers. They're accepting ours. So I literally race over there. I put another showing request in. I go in and I'm like, oh, everything's the same. Like, okay, fine. Let's do it. So we get this property under contract. I don't even think we did an inspection. I think we went and did our own inspection.
No, we had an inspector.
Did we?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't even remember.
I think my mom and I were there with him.
Oh, you guys were the inspectors?
We were there.
Lily's got another talent over here. But anyways, we get this house and right away, we closed on it on a Friday, and it was the longest closing to this day. I've closed hundreds and hundreds of transactions, and I've never had one last longer than this one.
this story, I can't even. We are so stupid. I mean, like, I can't believe we did this. So we were we were supposed to close on that Friday. That property was under my name, right? It is.
It was, yeah.
So it's under my name. And by the way, if you are a teacher, firefighter, police officer, lenders, love ya.
Thanks, love you.
So the property was under my name, and we left that day and never ended up closing. They said, well, we're going to push the closing till Monday. Well, my parents...
we dry closed is what they call it. They didn't fund. So technically, all the paperwork was submitted, but none of the money transferred to the seller.
Which means we did not own the property.
Technically, we were supposed to wait to do anything to the property until Monday. And we literally left and went right to the house and started demo.
Well, my parents were like standing in front of their house. They my dad took like a half day, and like we were supposed to close in the morning. Now it's like 5:00 on Friday, and he's got his tools and he's ready to go. And we're ready to go. We had planned that whole weekend. We were going to do demo. And then we just kind of look at each other. We're like, well, what do we do? And Blaine's like, well, I have access to the place.
Whatever.
So we went in, you guys, and demoed a house we did not own.
Don't say it like that. I mean,
it's true.
Right. But the paperwork was in the works and whatever. We don't condone this, okay? We're not telling you to go do this. Again. I would never suggest that you do the same thing, because if something did go sideways, we would be in big trouble and it would have been a big problem. But it didn't, and we own the property and everything is fine. But anyways, we go to this house, we start demoing, which actually wasn't a lot. It was just the bathroom. And it was the hallway underneath the entryway.
The flooring and the whole house smelled like dog pee. I think they had like 5 dogs. So that was... Whew.
So we ripped out all this old flooring. It was on a slab, so there was no basement. And we just get started. I mean, this... I still I remember you and your mom painting.
And my brother...
The ceilings are vaulted. They're cathedral ceilings, like vaulted ceilings. So you had to get up high on the ladder. And like I remember like Lily and her mom are up on the ladder. And I'm just like... Oh my God. Like you guys are like scared. You're painting like as slow as could be. But
yeah, like, I mean, we didn't even have experience painting, and like, that's okay. Like we just figured out. But I mean, these walls were so ugly orange that you could have slapped any color paint on like throughout the house and it would look like 100 times better.
Put, like, 3 coats on this. And we just did, your typical gray. We got some really cheap stick-on flooring that we put right on the slab that actually to this day is still working. I can't even believe it. The kitchen was okay. I think we had to get a new fridge and a new dryer. But then, we just started demoing the bathroom and we just like opened everything up. We have a friend who was a plumber. He took a look at the situation. We had to open up the drywall and they found that the leak, it was simple. I ended up tiling the whole bathroom myself. We bought a gigantic double vanity from OfferUp. I drove out to like Park Forest, which is probably a good 45 minutes away.
Other than being the co-hosting queen, you guys don't know that I used to be the OfferUp queen, and I kind of still am, but have kind of moved on from that.
She's just the queen of everything around here. Yeah, so
I found like the biggest, heaviest double vanity, and they had to bring that thing up onto the 2nd floor. Blaine and my dad, who has back issues, and we were like...
But we did it. We got it up there. Bathroom looks great. We haven't had any complaints. I remember putting this stick-on flooring. We would take turns, right? So Lily would go there with her mom. I would be with the kids, and then we would swap. I remember Noah and Zuzu were like running outside in the golf course because the golf course was closed. We're not just letting them get hit with golf balls. But then she would leave, and I would stay there. So then I'm putting flooring in. It's like
Blaine would do midnight, the night shift, so he'd stay till like 2 a.m.
Midnight, 1, 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. I'm putting flooring in, finishing all the other stuff up. But then we were like, okay, now it's time we can get this thing at least listed for rent. Mm-hmm. We bought it for $165, and we listed it for rent for $2,400. And I had once we finally did finish, which by the way, if you don't know this, when you buy a property, okay, if you buy it in the early part of the month, so we bought it, we'll say in July, I can't remember, I think it was July or August, and your first mortgage payment won't be due until September, and we pay our mortgages on the 15th because you get to the 15th. So first, we close on July, say 1st. First mortgage payment is due September 15th, right? We finished rehab by August 1st. So we had everything done. Actually, it was like July 27th. We had a tenant move in August 1st.
And our budget that we talked about was $15,000, but we spent only $13,000. So offer up days did pay off, and
we never had a deal work like that ever again. Every single one after that went over budget. This was the first one, and it was probably because we did all of the work. I mean, every single bit other than the furnace, which we hired out.
And also, we didn't have a lot of money, so we
didn't have any options.
We're checking every single penny, dollar that was being spent, monitoring that, trying to figure out what we could do to make it cheaper. Garage sales, picking up things on OfferUp that were free, just trying to do anything that we could. And that's also why we went with a really, really cheap flooring, which now we would never do that because we don't ever want to come back to a project.
We never bought that stick-on stuff ever again. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, like, so the tenant that we did get, we had like multiple people apply, but then we started looking into Section 8, and it's actually Joliet Housing Authority in that area. So we were like learning about it. And we decided, like, the inspector came to check the house, and we had to like fix a screen. It was like everything else was perfectly fine. But he said, hey, there's a family that's looking for a new place because the owner is selling the property. And you know me, I'm like, wait, he's selling? So I call the owner and I'm like, hey, you know, how are your tenants? I know they're looking for another house. I have one ready. And he's like, they are great. He's like, they're a great family. I would highly suggest you let them move in. And I'm like, okay. So we had no experience with Section 8.
But I do want to plug Dr. Joe Osmoa because we were diligently listening to and immersing ourselves into Bigger Pockets and books and everything that we could. So when the idea came up with Section 8, Blaine was like, well, I don't have experience with this. And I was like, well, I have listened to a few podcasts.
Pedal the metal.
With Dr. Joe Osmo, who was on quite a lot of podcasts, and he's great on Instagram too, but he was on a few Bigger Pockets podcasts. So we went with his strategy at the time. And what he suggests is his strategy is always like adding bedrooms and bathrooms potentially if he could. And then he Section 8s. So add value and then turn it into a Section 8 property. But what he suggests is when you are looking through the people that are going to move in, your tenants that are going to move into your property, his suggestion is to actually go to the current home where they are living, because that is going to really show you how well they take care of that property, which in turn is going to show you how well they're going to take care of your property. So after Blaine met with this landlord, he actually had asked these...
Because the queen of delegating right next to me is like, Blaine, yeah, this is a great idea. Go do it. And I'm like, oh, so I'm just like, well, I'm not going to go. And I'm like, fine. So I drive over there, you know, I hear in Bigger Pockets, they're like, check their cars, look in their windows. You know, they treat their houses the way they treat their cars. So I'm like walking up, I look in the window, the car looked okay. And, you know, I'm like, knock on the door. And, you know, I sit down with this family.
He walks right in.
I'm like, where am I sitting? I was very confident. And I'm just like, they're like, here, sit down. I met all of them. It was a mother and a father, a daughter with a baby, and then the father adopted his two younger, like, stepsisters, I think it was. But it's really, really nice. And like, it had a lot of connection to me because my aunt adopted 6 children. So we talked a little bit about that. And I told him I appreciate the fact that, he helped out his family by adopting, I don't know if they were his cousins or nieces or whatever. But it was a lot of people to be moving into this house with one full bathroom. So I was a little bit nervous, but the house looked really good. I talked to the owner, and of course I was like, hey, if you need someone to sell, let me know. But anyways, these guys, we ended up going through the paperwork. We got $2,200 a month, I think Joliet Housing Authority gave us when we were looking for 24, which wasn't the end of the world. And they were covering at the time like $1,300 of it. So they still had to buy they had to pay $900 on their own, and now they're completely off Section 8, and
they've been off for a couple
they've
years.
gotten out of the what they call it in Joliet is they graduated out of the program. Their income has grown. When that happened, I called and I'm like, hey, is everything okay? And they were like, yeah. And I said, you know what? His name's Elton. I'm like, really proud of you, man. Like, great work. If you need anything, let me know. They've been living in this property for almost 4 years now. I think we've talked to them. We started out doing like 6-month inspections where we would just go over there, meet with them, make sure everything's good with the house. We had a couple little minor issues. Remember the one? They thought there was a bird in the microwave. The stove vent. So we sent Lily's dad over there, and
my dad is like loves animals so much. So he'll do like some handiwork for properties that we own. But he was like hyperventilating about the fact that he didn't want to hurt a bird, and he was worried about the bird nest. But I think he found the nest.
I don't even know what happened, but
anyway, there was no bird.
We put a different type of vent on there, so like no chance a bird could get in.
My dad was like, "This is the worst job you could have asked me to do."
But oh my gosh, so like we couldn't believe this is our first like deal, right? Our first like investment property, specifically bought to be an investment property. We close on it, rehab it ourselves, under budget. Tenant moves in before the first mortgage payment is done. And it was like, oh my gosh, like the confidence just grew, and we were like, all right, let's get the next one.
Yeah.
And we literally did. We bought another property like a few weeks later, and that was our second property that we owned in Downers Grove. And that one was way over budget.
Yeah, but let's go back a little bit because I do want to say a couple things. When we started investing, and then my parents told us that they were interested in investing with us, this was a crucial point that honestly at the time like completely boosted all of our confidence. And if you're getting into your first property and you're thinking about it, utilizing a partnership, especially someone that is in your family or one of your really good friends, someone that you trust, is huge. Because first of all, we took that $32,000, down payment that we knew we had, and we cut that in half. So it didn't seem so scary anymore. All the work that had to be done, we divided and conquered. The education that it took to do all the things we did, we all divided and conquered that. Like Bling knew all the knowledge about the numbers and the ARV and, all of those things. And then I, at the time, was super focused on, I read the book Estimating Rehab Costs, and I created the spreadsheet that aligned with the book, and I was getting a ton of quotes, and every single material list, just because we were on such a tight budget, like every single material list, like I had entered into the spreadsheet of things that we would need. So, flooring, paint. So I was like, how many gallons of paint, Blaine, do you think we'd need? He would tell me. So I would enter that in. And we had budgeted every single thing that we could. And then when we saw something, like I didn't know how expensive vanities could be. So that's when we started looking at other things. But working together and doing this together as a community, then we celebrated that and we were excited to move on to the next property. And I think that it would have taken so much longer if we had just done this by ourselves. But because we did it together, we were able to, not only really work together, but especially this was COVID, we were often having Zoom meetings together with one another about, our a little side business. And it was kind of keeping us motivated to work. And so essentially 7 days a week, there was somebody there doing something. And I think that was really huge. And we really did not waste any days.
Yeah. And it was like I said, everything worked absolutely how we had hoped. And that's typically not what happens in real estate. Even the appraisal, like we were hoping later, when we wanted to do the BRRRR, because we did end up BRRRing this property, we refinanced and it appraised, I think we were hoping for 235 and appraised for 245. And every other one of our properties, we have never gotten an appraisal to match what we wanted. It's always been lower other than that property.
$165,000 in $13,000 rehab
So
we didn't have any
178.
mortgage payments, so no mortgage payments.
There's no holding costs. Yeah.
Right.
And then it appraised for 245. So it was a great deal all in all. And during this whole time, we ended up buying this second property. This Plainfield home was unbelievable for us. It really built our confidence and gave us that motivation to go get another one, which we did. And we'll talk about that in our next episode, which will be COVID Part 2. Crushing it with COVID Part 2. Next episode. But so look forward to that one. That was our first project that we bought that was completely over budget, appraised low, ended up
everything went wrong, and then everything went right.
We had a tenant that came in, moved in, and then bailed on us.
Yep.
So there's a lot to talk about in this next episode. And then we ended up when she left and fled and bailed out of her lease, we turned that thing into a short-term rental, and that really boosted everything.
And
so opened up a door closed and a door opened at the same time. And we'll talk about that next time in Part 2, Crushing It with COVID. Crushing it with the co-sex, crushing it with COVID.
Don't get
See
COVID.
you next time. Adios, amigos.